Hi, welcome back to our Maine Homestead and part 2 of building a semi-traditional root cellar. If you haven't seen part 1 of this series, we'll put a link up here somewhere. It's basically an overview, kind of getting you caught up to where the building process is right now. So today I'm going to be installing the ventilation system for the root cellar, specifically the low cold air intake vent. So ideally in a root cellar you have a cold air intake which is low to the ground. It comes in at ground level, drops down and enters the root cellar at the floor level of the root cellar. And then a warm air outlet which allows warm air to rise in the root cellar and then exit. Those vents should be on opposite sides of the building, of the root cellar. So I'll show you where mine are going to be. I had a couple of problems to solve, or a couple of things to overcome in deciding where to put the root cellar vent. So one, I've built rock walls up to a certain level, and then on top of those rock walls I'm building or laying logs, so there will be log walls. The outer two walls where one of the vents would come through, or both vents would come through, is 2 layers of logs with 2-inch foam board insulation in between. So I decided not to potentially compromise that insulation properties of that and come in beside that. Come in, make a turn, and then come down to the bottom of the root cellar and come out. So that was one issue, so I decided not to go through that wall. Number 2 is the weight of the rock walls and then logs on top of them. So the logs on top, not as much of an issue because the weight would be distributed all along the length of that rock wall. But the weight of the rocks in the area where the vent is going to come in to the root cellar will be a considerable amount of weight. These rocks are not light, believe me. I've moved them around enough, they're heavy. But I think I've solved both of those issues. I definitely solved the issue of coming through the wall by coming around it. But I've decided, and I'll show you what I'm going to do, but I'm going to come in behind the rock wall. Rock wall's not there yet, but I'm going to come in behind where the rock wall will be, and then across and under. There will only be a few rocks and not near as much weight on top of the vent system. So let me show you that. So here's the door opening. The plan is to come right along where this girt is. This is a temporary girt, so it will come out. So part of the vent system will come right along where that girt sits, except a little lower at ground level. Come over to where you can see this kind of half moon shape. That's a shovel mark. I'm going to go down from there. So they are down behind where the rock wall will eventually be. So the rock wall is going to come across this way. The vent will come down behind, through the dirt behind, turn and come out to be flush with the edge of where the rock wall will eventually be. So then the weight of rock will just be on top of the vent box here up to the height of where the rocks stop, and then logs on top of that. Yeah, so here's just one of the smaller rocks that came out of this hole right here. So they're everywhere. So this is from the ground level looking down into the root cellar. That's the top of the girt there. But you can see I just cut a vertical channel. Now I'm going to try to fit the boards that will form the vertical portion of the vent. So this is actually the bottom piece of the tube vent where it will enter into the root cellar, which will eventually be beneath and behind the rock wall that's going to go along this edge. I did run into one problem. I realized I needed to take the girt down that was running here so I could fit the vertical tube in the right spot. Of course, knocked down a couple of rocks, but they were just loose ones sitting on top of this wall. Once I get the full course of rocks in and build up and get them all wedged together, then I'll replace that one where it should be, and I don't think they're going anywhere. So I got it level front to back and side to side. I'll probably still have to tweak it as I'm moving things around. But I ran into a little bit of an issue, which I've had some issues with before, but it's never been a problem because I've never built anything this fine, I guess, even though this is a very crude tube I'm building. But this is rough cut lumber, so if you're dealing with rough cut lumber, you're going to realize that a 1x8 inch board, while better than from a hardware store or dimensional lumber, what I call dimensional lumber, better than it being 3/4 by 7.5. It is 1x8 typically, but it might be 1x8 1/4. Since I'm building a box or tubes and trying to get them to fit together, I ended up just setting my table saw to rip all the boards at like 7.5. That gives me plenty of interior space in the vent and makes everything uniform, so hopefully it all fits together. So here's the second part to this puzzle. Let's see how well it fits. Looks like it's going to fit pretty well. I'll end up attaching this to the bottom part. You can see that it comes up, and then this is the opening that'll go along the ground to the outside. Now all I need to do is I'll get it lined up and cut a piece that fits there to close off the top of the vent. So I attached piece number 2, which is the vertical there, to piece number 3, which is the one going out to the edge of the door. attached those two together and I sat it down onto the base piece, the first piece that I built. Now it's just a matter of connecting, being sure all three pieces are connected as well as possible and stable, and then I could start building the rock wall around it. So this is the opening to the outside. Cool air will flow in through that opening, flow along that tube. Cool air sinks, so it should flow down through the vertical tube there and then make the turn and come out the opening at the base of the rock wall. That was a piece by piece build, obviously, just because I was figuring it out as I went. But I think it actually turned out good. It's very sturdy. I've stood on it. I think it'll be there for a while. Now I've got to screen the outer opening just to prevent pests from coming in, and then figure out how I'm going to close that opening off in the wintertime. Once you get the cellar down to the temps you want it, that time of year, you want to close off that opening so that it doesn't get too cool. Now that that's in place, I can finish the final rock wall. So that'll be the next video in this series. I'll show you kind of my methods for building a dry stone wall. Thanks for watching. Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and leave us a comment in the comment section. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you soon.